I don't speak Finnish, but I don't really understand a single word of it yet. But it's all. Yes, my name's Edward Boileau, or the French would say Boileau, and I'm starting to learn French now, and I shall tell you why a little bit later. So I'm going to talk today about injury prevention. Now, we've been hearing a little bit about injuries to ribs and backs, and I know a little bit about injuries and rehab, and I'm going to explain about that and about coaching with the RP3. Now, I've got quite a long relationship with the RP3 because I rode at school in the 1980s, where I went to school in America, a sports school. We started using the Concept 2 very early on with the wheels that looked like bicycles that had sections in them, the very first Concept 2. I then went to Durham University, where I rode in their university crew, and again we used the Concept 2. I then got a postgraduate to Oxford, where I again used the Concept 2 a lot. In the early 1990s, 1992, I started rowing at Oriel Kensington Rowing Club, where I was coached by Peter Haining, who was a 3-times world champion in the lightweight single, and he introduced me to the Row Perfect machine. And in fact, for half a year, I had his Row Perfect machine in my tiny bedroom living room while I was working on some of the things he'd asked me to work on. And I then ended up getting a second one from the Oxford University Boat Club when they replaced their 8-year-old machines that had been used the whole time with new ones. So I then had 2 Row Perfect machines in my living room, which was very complicated. Anyway, I'm going to talk now about injuries. Many training injuries are avoidable, and just as there are many ways to move a boat quickly. And I've been looking at different ways of moving boats, and many coaches advocate moving boats with a lot of power, and they do huge amounts of training, a huge load, and a lot of that on the Concept 2, just because it's very easy to collect the numbers, and it's very easy to rank people based on that. That also can result in rowing injuries, such as stress fractures, and those stress fractures increase dramatically whenever you have a big change, such as suddenly introducing ergos in the winter, or changing to sweep rowing from just sculling, or changing from just erging to sculling. Whenever you have a change, it's very important for the first few weeks to be very aware of the mobility and making sure that you're doing lots of stretching, so stretching out the sides and stretching out the full system, to make sure that you're keeping the flexibility. And I'm going to talk a little bit about movement chain. So as a coach, it was very important because I started off coaching in 2000, the London Oratory School, and the year before I took over, they came very last in the National Schools Head, and I only had 8 boys rowing. We owned no equipment, and it was very difficult to get worse when your school is ranked very last in the country. So I arrived, and I couldn't afford to lose any boys because I only had 8 boys rowing, and I had a few people who could cox. So whenever I had an injury, I couldn't take people out, and the only boat we could borrow to start with was an 8. So it was a big problem. I then started to get everyone sculling because I had lots of friends who were scullers, and my club would lend me lots of single sculls. So I got the boys sculling, and that helped a huge amount. But the movement chain, I found that when a boy hurt his knee playing rugby or football, when he was erging, he regularly hurt his back or his ribs. And so I found that it's because the back takes the extra movement. So if you find that a rower can't do that properly because a knee or an ankle hurts, don't make them erg hard, because their back will compensate for the movement they can't get in the knee or the ankle. And that's a very simple thing to do to make sure they can all get the correct movement and posture. Likewise, I would have them move to the side, and then with the head moved, just to make sure that they had full movement in the spine. And simple things like that can reduce many of these injuries, making sure that the chain, the movement chain, is kept from having points which block or are stiff. So I'm just going to go through my experience first as an individual in rowing and with the Row Perfect machine and the Concept 2, and then as a coach. So in 1998, I stopped rowing and I went to work in Asia, where I was managing my father's factory. I spent a lot of time working and flying, and I worked one day for 48 hours constantly working on finishing a contract. I drank a lot of coffee. It was an invitation for an application to tender document in Korea for their national museum, and I worked for 48 hours and then I slept on the plane going back to England. I then woke up and I worked from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. I was then driving up to Nottinghamshire along the motorway with my cruise control on at 70 miles an hour. I didn't want to break the speed limit. And I fell asleep. And that was my SAR. What happened is I fell asleep and I rolled it into a big lamppost. And I knocked the lamppost out, and the car and the lamppost ended up V-shaped. I then rolled the car down a hill. This is where the lamppost hit the car. I was in there, and at 1 in the morning, the hospital called my parents, and they said, "We have your son in intensive care. He will probably be dead in the hour, and we found his donor card with your contact number on it. We're just calling you to let you know we'll do what we can, but I'm afraid it's not good." And so that was very upsetting for my parents, and they aged about 2 years in the 4 days that I was in intensive care. But what was interesting was that I'd been training, and I'd been rowing, and I loved rowing, and I loved sculling, and I was training as hard as I could. And when they put the oxygen mask on me, even though I'd lost more than half of my blood, the oxygen content of my blood went back to normal immediately. And they hadn't seen that before, but they hadn't seen many rowers who were very keen in intensive care in that unit before. And that's because rowing is an oxygen deprivation sport. My body was used to using every little bit of oxygen. And when they put that oxygen mask back on me, my oxygen content went back to normal immediately. They said, "Oh my goodness. Well, let's see if we can save him." I'd broken every single rib on this side. I'd broken this collarbone in 3 places, this collarbone into 27 bits, my hip, my shoulder, my tibula and fibula. I was a bit of a mess, and I'd lost a chunk, I'd lost half of my right lung. So I was fairly injured. And I went from being a lightweight over the next year and a half to being 84 kilos, because I could still eat a lot. But I wanted to get back into training. And every time I got back into training, I would re-break ribs. And then, because I was training with friends, and I would come back and we'd go down to the club, and I'd sit on the Concept 2 with them, and of course, as Jacob was saying, when you're next to your friends training, you want to pull hard. He's pulling a 143 split. Right, I've got to pull 140. Oh, he's now at a 137 split. Oh, I've got to hit a 137 split. You can't stop yourself. Bang! I'd break another rib, or refracture a rib. I then started, after doing lots of Concept 2 ergs, when I was out sculling, I'd refracture ribs. So I had to have solutions. So I stopped using the Concept 2, and stress fractures normally take 6 to 8 weeks to recover. In my school program, if I had one boy out 6 to 8 weeks, I couldn't take the 8 out. So it meant I had to stop people getting injured at school. So on Concept 2s, we didn't have money to buy sliders. We had 2 sets of Concept 2 ergos when I arrived. We ended up getting about 1 a year, and I'll show you some photos in a few moments. But I ended up putting the Concept 2s on wheels and having them train on concrete, so the Concept 2 would move almost like a row perfect. And so if some of you don't have sliders, just try putting them on those dollies they use for moving pianos. Those work quite well. Goodness knows what it does to the numbers, but it keeps it keeps the rowers from getting injured. So my solutions for myself was that I made the gearing lighter, so I moved my pins out. I was being coached after Peter Haining by a lightweight woman who was Christina's size. I moved my gates out to the same spread she had, even though she only weighed 57 kilos, or 54 even. I shortened my blades, even though I'd moved my pins right out. I had a smaller arc, so instead I made sure that I never had my body go past 15 degrees at the catch or 15 degrees at the finish. I used the RP3 religiously rather than the Concept 2. And I slowly built my fitness up, but I kept getting back spasms. So I then put in some active injury prevention by doing some yoga, which helped with the core conditioning, the mobilization, the movement of the spine, and the whole movement of the body, and that combined the stretching. So the yoga helped me with the core conditioning, the mobilization, stretching, and I did no heavy weights, I did some light weights, and likewise with the school, I would make them do the exercises with poles for the first 3 years. They did no heavy weights, but for 3 years we were working on posture, lifting posture for the cleans with broom poles. That was it. Then when they became 16, 17, 18, I started using the weights, but we did 3 years of just work on posture, and that really helped. So, what is the body doing is the key. So the key reason I kept breaking ribs when I was coming forwards is when you're moving your body forwards on the Concept 2, my upper body comes forwards. When I get to the catch, I have to push and my body has to change direction. That load is equivalent to probably about 40 to 50 kilograms if I'm pushing a hard split. So if you think that you come forwards, your body's coming forwards, you get to the catch position, you've got the load of your legs being applied, you've also got to move your body away, that's completely different to what happens on the Row Perfect machine. When you come up to the Row Perfect machine, you don't have to change direction with your body, you just push the unit away from you. And the unit there is equivalent to what a single scull of about 14 kilograms is, plus the wetted surface area of the boat. So that's what that unit is designed to be equivalent to. And you're not having to move your body away from it, you just push it away from your body. So the impact on your body for each stroke is significantly lower. So that might be 21 to 27 kilograms, as opposed to about 40 to 50 kilograms load every time on the Concept 2. That's a big difference. So be aware of what the body is doing during the stroke. On the static erg, you need to move your body away from the unit. And when teaching the children about it, it made a big difference putting them onto rollers or the Row Perfect to start with. And I used the Row Perfect a lot to show them how to take the catch properly before putting them onto Concept 2s. So the key thing is the RP3 has less impact at the catch and the initial drive of the stroke on this part of the body. Numerous studies, such as the British Journal of Sports, have shown that excessive use of ergos does injure the lower back, and people that I've coached who've gone to row for Great Britain, on the GB, they make them row about 18 kilometres a day on the Concept 2, and 2 of the people that I spoke to about it had huge problems with their trap muscles, their trapezius, overdevelops and makes everything uncomfortable. So those muscles here are just, these muscles take the load because you've got the extra load coming up here, and these muscles take a lot of the load, or these muscles across here, and ideally in the rowing stroke you actually want the load lower in these lower lats here. So these muscles are the ones you want to engage, not these. The concept 2 encourages these, and you get massive growth in these muscles, particularly if you're eating a huge amount and training a lot, and if you're doing a lot of mileage on the C2, these do overdevelop. So one last thing here, that the non-fixed seat, the small bar and the flywheel all rock. They don't feel stable. So some people think, oh, these machines aren't well made. It's deliberately made to be like that, so that your posture is maintained, because you feel unstable as you would in a single scull. So that maintains the posture, and that's really important as you get tired, because as you get tired, it starts wobbling if you allow your body to collapse. So this RP3 really helps with posture, and when coaching I found that posture helped reduce injury. If you sat up, if you stayed on top of the work, and that really helped reduce injury just by sitting properly. Now this boat, these are big schoolboys. I had one boy that I coached who went off to Oxford. He was coached by Sean Bowden, who made them do huge volumes of training on this, but at very low volume, so that very low splits. So, and the Americans joke saying, that's why the English are very good at going slow, because they spend so much time on the ergo at very low splits. But he got to be very, very fast on the water. I then was exhausted, and over the summer holiday, he said, can I coach the school squad over the summer holiday? And I said, please. So he got these boys on the ergo every day for the entire summer holiday. And when they finished on the ergo, he took them out sculling for about 14, 15 kilometers. They then came in, had something to eat. He then got a long bench and made them jump onto the bench like that and off the bench like that until they couldn't do that anymore. And then he got them pick up the bench like that and take it over their heads and then over that way and then put it down. He made them work every day for the whole summer holiday. I had no idea he was doing this. I said, yes, you can coach. I came back, and these schoolboys were this sized, and they were huge. Absolutely massive. We enter races, and suddenly we're winning races, and they're powerful. I take them to the British Junior Indoor Rowing Championships. He wins the gold medal for 2,000 meters. He wins the silver medal. Oh my goodness, we suddenly get him into Oxford. We get him into Cambridge. He goes to Liverpool University. His university had never qualified for Henley. They suddenly qualify with Henley, with him as the captain. This guy goes to Oxford, wins in the lightweight 7-seat. This guy goes to Durham University. These two to Manchester. They all go to rowing universities. They all continue rowing. After university, only these two didn't rowing because this guy goes and sets up a company in China and makes a fortune teaching sports and English at the same time. Oh my goodness. They all achieved in rowing. It was wonderful. But one of the wonderful things about this group and the team that I was teaching around then was a group where I had a fours race coming up, and it was still a small squad. And I had everyone out in singles. This is a borrowed boat from my rowing club. This is not the school colour. This is Putney Town Rowing Club. This is the club that lent us lots of equipment. They also, just before one of the fours races, lent us a brand new four. And it had only been used about 3 times. I had the boys race in singles. We had a big squad. I said the fastest 4 boys in singles are in the 4 for the school set. And the fastest boy sets the stroke profile, and so we all copy that, and so that's what happened. So they went off, they had a time trial, the fastest boy set the stroke profile, and then the others basically copied that stroke profile, and they thought it was a secret weapon. We were starting behind Westminster School. I said, all you have to do is overtake the school in front of you, they're the favourites, and stay ahead of them till the end. I thought, they'll never be able to do that. And that's exactly what they did. So they overtook them, stayed ahead of them, and won the race. Brilliant. This was 10 years later. This was a used boat we bought off a girls' school. We now own 8 8s. We own £150,000 worth of equipment. We're one of the fastest state schools in the country. This boat beat Eton and Hampton in J16 Championship 8s in the schools head, the thing we come very last in the year before I took over. We're no longer a rubbish school at rowing. But, look at them. They're tiny. And yet they beat Eton and Hampton. And I thought, how can I make them bigger and stronger without breaking them? We now own lots of Concept 2s. I still only have 2 row-perfect machines. So, how do I make them stronger without breaking them? And a lot of that, I had the few boys who did get injured, I put them on, again, rollers, on concrete, on the Concept 2s. We did a lot of stretching, we did a lot of core stability. And I started trying to communicate as much as I could to teach them as much, because this was an incredibly clever boat. They were all very, very clever. So I really pushed as much understanding of the stroke as possible. So we used the row perfect machines to look at stroke profiles. This is just a random one I did last week, just to show a stroke profile. This is the sort of thing I did with them. A stroke profile where we would talk about it. We would talk about these numbers, what they meant, what the boys did. And then we would talk about what this is, the difference between this and that. So I want a front-loaded stroke. So the previous one, so here we're about 41%. That's my normal, if I'm not thinking about anything, just plodding along stroke. And then here, front-loaded, 31%. I say, right, okay, I want you to front-load the strokes on the 8. I want you to push the front end. Let's work on doing that. Suddenly, they get it. They understand. That makes them quicker without me doing anything. They just get it. This boat is those boys 2 years later. So Gerald Elphick was somebody who helped me. He was an incredible organizer. He had done a master's. He'd worked at Goldman Sachs for 5 years, then thought, I want to help a state school, and he joined our rowing program to organize things. And he was basically managing this crew. And we took them to Valery Kleshnev to do the telemetry. And we had a stroke profile done for every single one of them. The telemetry, these boys understood things because they were clever, we were talking about the different things. And we went through this technical discussion. And the understanding of the stroke, we talked about stroke length, arc, the peak performance, where they're putting in the work. We didn't have the seat movement. So these things here are the things that the new sensors are doing. But we went through. We did go through the arc, actually, but stroke length, not the seat movement, not the blade flight path, but we looked at the curve, and we looked at all their data, and we really made them think, and we trained them as hard as we could, with a lot of stretching, and we made sure they could all touch the floor with their hands like that. We did as many things as possible to reduce the tightness of the hamstrings, because that led to a lot of back injury, and we did some other basic things like that. So this technical discussion led to more understanding, which led to speed, because the boys would understand what they had to work on in order to make them themselves faster, and they took on responsibility. Yes?
Did you measure the switch stroke in the 8 and compare it to the RP3, or how did you...
We didn't. So what we did is we had some strokes on the RP3 to teach them the meaning of these things.
Okay.
We then had the telemetry from the 8, which showed their stroke profile for all of them. So we attached here on the gates, this is them racing at Henley.
Yeah.
We attached on the gates the telemetry. We went through with Kleshnev, with the Boileau telemetry, and we had a full stroke profile and power profile for every person in the 8. We had a single page report for each of them.
Yeah.
And we went through those reports with them. It's a bit like going through a school report with one's child. You go through, so, oh, well, yes, you're not connecting very quick. But they took it very, very, very well.
It's a pretty short stroke you have there.
They were the first state school to win first states at the National Schools Regatta. So they weren't slow. It is a short stroke.
Yeah.
Short stroke, small arc, high rating.
Yeah, interesting.
It worked. So, again, the first state school in history to win first states at National Schools Regatta. So, yes, we were rowing in a different way, but there are many ways to move a boat quickly.
Yeah.
And my way here, this was with Gerald Elphick managing this crew, but I'd been coaching them earlier, and my approach also was definitely to push the shorter stroke, smaller arc, higher rating. They're not a big, powerful crew.
Yeah.
So that technical discussion really did help. So the key things, the RP3 helps with the correct pivot points. So the pivot point here, because at the catch on the concept 2, it's very hard to get that correct because your body has to change direction. On the RP3, you're just pushing that away, so you can just get that connection without needing to pull. It's very much easier to get that pivot point correctly. Likewise, your posture is easier to maintain, especially when you're tired, because it shifts. It reminds you, sit up. The connection is easier to teach and feel. I'll show you that in a moment. The drive, it's easier to engage the correct muscles and then bring the glutes in, because it's easier to feel the opening of the back against the leg drive. So when you're pushing with the leg drive, it's really easy to feel it on the row perfect 3 to open the back against it. It's quite difficult for me and for many of my friends who are quite serious rowers to feel that on the concept 2.
And this slide is available translated in Finnish on the table. And actually Kimmo was just asking for it. I'm pretty happy that actually we got them.
Could you maybe hand those out? So we've got some translations there. And so, yes, Katrina's just going to hand out translations of these points. So the stroke profiles, it's very easy to teach and motivate people using these stroke profiles. And the targets and data, the data is very, very good for teaching different people and setting targets. Now, differentiation is a key classroom word in England. I've been a teacher for 16 years. Differentiation is basically saying, for the different skill levels in a classroom, sometimes you have to prepare other materials. The Row Perfect is fantastic for doing that, because in a club you will always have people of different skill levels and different problems, and different target setting is very easy with the Row Perfect 3. And so that is a very useful thing for a coach, because you want a big squad and you want a happy squad. And if you just say to people, right, I'm only interested in people who can get under a 6:30 on your 2K, it makes the whole squad just go, because it's very hard to motivate somebody who only weighs 50 kilograms, but in 3 years' time is going to be an amazing rower. And when you're running a school squad, you want targets, you want people to think about it, you want them all to actively want to improve and change something, and the Row Perfect 3 is wonderful for that. And that's why I have 2 old Row Perfects in my living room, and I have several new of these RP3s in my place in France, which I shall tell you about in a moment. Now here, this is just a nudge sequence, which was what I was talking about, how the exercises are very, very easy to teach. Yes, please. Push play there. There we go. If you push play. Yeah, wonderful. So here, this is just me trying to show sorry, I tend to also not strap myself in, so it's just that keeps the pressure on the footplate. And this drill is so easy, just teaching the sequence of pushing the unit away, and you do it on this, you then put them in the boat, and they understand how to do it. And the sequencing, breaking the stroke down, starting off with just a nudge, where you just nudge the boat along. It's catch, nudge, catch, nudge. On this, it's simple. On the concept 2, it takes ages because they lift. And likewise, there are so many sequencing exercises that are really easy on the row perfect that are difficult on the concept 2. So that's another key feature. So I'd like to thank Christina and Penty for their censors and for this meeting. Now, their censors, I just have a quick word about the arc and shortcuts. Now, Valery Kleshnev, after we did the telemetry with him, he's brilliant, but we've been coaching these boys so hard for many years. We've had them in singles first, then into pairs, then the pairs into fours, then the fours into the 8, then back into pairs, racing in pairs, technique with posture. And we had a few weeks before Henley where in the first round we're meeting a boat that had 3 people who rowed for Great Britain in the Junior 8 in it. We had to beat them. They were bigger and stronger than us. How could we do it? I wanted to say, now if we move the pins, how can we get the arcs the same? He said, no, just make them row better. No, we need to make adjustments. That's why we did the telemetry, because we haven't got time to fix their technique. So how can we make adjustments? Can we adjust the foot height? No. Make them row better. So I thought, oh no, well, why have we done all this? So I secretly did a few changes, but we did beat that boat in the first round. Then we ended up losing later on Henley to a boat coached by one of my friends from university. So that was all right. Anyway, but using the sensors that Christina and Penty have made, I myself took this data and changed my technique in a race. So this is a friend of mine who's much shorter than I am, and my seat speeds, which are completely different. And I thought, oh no, this is completely different. Well, we'll have to try something. So I tried, this is him accelerating earlier, and this is me speeding up in the middle of the stroke, and him then accelerating at the end. Oh no, he's rushing in. We've got different seat times. This is terrible. It doesn't feel quite right. His wife's just had their second baby. He's been unable to sleep recently. He hasn't trained for quite a few months. I've been rushing around doing all sorts of things. Neither of us are training much, but we were racing. We wanted to do well. So I just held my legs down a bit longer and rocked over a bit longer, and suddenly things felt better. We wouldn't have done that had we not done the seat speed. We then looked at the arcs using, I have 2 sensors. We put one on both of our right oars, and then we moved them over to the left oars. And my goodness, it told us something the row perfect had told us, because my stroke on the row perfect was 105, what was it about? Yes, 105, no, there was 100, it was 145, and his was about 135 centimetres. And indeed, in the boat, I was about 104 to 105 degrees, and he was about 95. So it's almost 10 degrees different. And so the arc, we were 10 degrees different. And on the row perfect, we were about 10 centimetres different. So rather than Kreshnev, who said, no, just change your technique after we had all the telemetry data, I had the data saying that we were 10 degrees different. I moved my pins out again, even though mine were quite, and I moved Costa's pins in, so his pins are further in than mine, and suddenly we're rowing along. I've got an oar sensor here, and we did our training after we made the adjustment, so and amazingly, when doing that training, suddenly we both had identical arcs. So we both bang on 100. So I had been on 105, he'd have been on 95. We changed it. It just felt more comfortable. And we were against lots of really fit, strong people who'd been training. And we just managed to win the overall masters of the pairs head, which is 511 pairs going off one after another. And there are a huge number of masters, and so we were very lucky there. And you can see I'm still my balance all over. But I'd like to thank you two for your census, because I think that gave us the 2.7 seconds over the other crew. And lastly, I'm setting up a training venue in Bergerac, a bit of a midlife crisis. I stopped my teaching job, I was exhausted. We'd won at national schools. Eton had rehired Alex Henshaw-Wood. We were never ever going to beat them ever again in any category, because he's an amazing coach, and so I thought it was a very good time to stop. The house in Bergerac is a house on the Dordogne River, and we're going to be looking at skills, technique, balance, endurance, enjoyment, learning. I'll give out little bits of paper about that in a moment. And Charlotte Taylor Booth is going to be joining me, and she's somebody who's in my rowing club, dropped by the women's 8, and she started sculling. And in 2013 we went to France for some long training, long cycling, then sculling, then more cycling, then more sculling. And she went from being dropped by the mediocre 8 in our club in 2012 to then sculling on Sunday mornings with me and some friends, and then going out to coming 5th in the Great Britain trials, and then 3rd, and then 2nd, and then 1st in the Great Britain lightweight trials. And in fact, here she is setting a new world best time in Poznan, the European Championships, and that was quite exciting. And they beat New Zealand, I think, in the finals in what was a very, very exciting race. Now, the sheets that were given out with the translations are basically this, just 3 key points I wanted to end on, and then just show you one sheet that I found very useful, and just have one comment of that Katrina can get to you later. Just chain. When you're coaching people, remove stiffness from the chain. So if you've got a back injury there, that you're not able to rock over completely or curve your back in or out, don't put people on the Concept 2 or Row Perfect. Just have them stretch and have them get over that back problem. If they can't do that freely, then work on stretching and mobility. Likewise, if they can't do mobility exercises, make sure that you're doing mobility with particularly teenagers who are growing quickly. Stretching as well. If you start off with a bunch of 16-year-old boys, they're like 70-year-old men if they haven't been stretching. They can only do that. Put in a lot of hamstring stretches. That prevents a lot of back injuries. So several senior physiotherapists and osteopaths I've talked to said, about 75% of the back injuries they see are from tight hamstrings. So get everyone in your squad being able to do that. Just have them practice, stretch and stretch. I found the plow in yoga, then dropping the legs down, then coming up again, rolling into a forward bend, works brilliantly. So the body, again, reduce the impact, be aware. So that's where the Row Perfect 3 comes in. In training, reduce the impact on the core. When you're training, also, if you can reduce the impact and load while sculling by moving your pins out slightly or shortening your blades or just thinking about a smaller arc, then often if you're prone to rib injuries, do that. So you're prone to rib injuries, make your load lighter. Don't use the big blades with your pins right in at 158. Make it lighter for you. Okay, so I would start off 160 spread and maybe a 286 length with a nice 87 inboard, or even shorter blades, and just work on tapping along. Don't allow your body go past 15 degrees at the catch. Don't go past 15 degrees at the finish. And that brings me on to this last bit. So the Australian Institute of Sport have fantastic data on nutrition. So you're training as a nutritionist, look at the Australian Institute of Sport info. It's fantastic. Likewise, they've got this core essentials, which I sort of used a variation of this. I disapproved of the pelvis dropping a little bit here on this exercise. I had them occasionally do it to feel what not to do, because from here I felt you're slumping your weight into the boat, and that increases the surface area of the boat, which makes it, you need more energy to get it back up to speed. So I would tell the boys to stop at this 15 degrees back, so at the 30 degrees. So I'd have them stop here and not allow that to happen. So this little drop back a little, I'd not want them to do. So I'd come back just to this. But then I'd go through these exercises, and these exercises combined with the row perfect 3, combined with stretching, reduced injury significantly, which enabled our school squad to do relatively well. So, right, that's my presentation, and if you have any questions, yes, I'd love to answer them. And yes?
Do you prefer dynamic stretching more than static stretching?
Yes, now the stretching, I think dynamic stretching is very important, because rowing is not a static activity. So likewise with core stability, just the plank is not a good thing, because rowing is dynamic. So if I'm doing the plank, I have them lift legs and back down, and then doing it, going into the Superman and moving, so that they're moving while doing it and trying not to twist the hips. So dynamic stretching, definitely. Yes, yes. Other questions? Right, so if you do have any questions later, yes.
I have one that just came to mind. You mentioned the pivot point from the shoulder.
Yes.
Yeah, I have had some discussion with the coach about how to do it in the catch. So your view is just like from the shoulder pivot, the arm is straight and pivot, do like
yes.
this
Now,
at the catch.
as I said before, there are many ways to move the boat quickly.
Yeah.
And within that category, there are many ways to take a catch. And the catch, lots of people come forwards with their shoulders and almost throw the blade in. For me, because of my rib injuries, I stop myself at 15 degrees. I make sure I have at least a fist between my knee and my chest. And I make sure that it's a quick, light catch, and that the only pivot point is here. So I've already squared. I know lots of people flick the blade in, but again, I like to keep the hands completely relaxed at the catch, so I prepare slightly earlier, and it's just that. And that's exactly what I coach the schoolboys to do, but again, in the sweep rowing, just the outside hand up, and completely relaxed, just a hook. And again, it's a very small hook, equivalent to a ping pong ball, sized C, a small hook here, whereas the finish here is a bigger circle, almost like a grapefruit-sized ball. And then when you've got that nailed, then this can change according to the conditions. So if you've got mirror flat water and you're in the middle of the race, this often becomes smaller. And at the start, where you have big puddles, and it's very important to keep the tap down. But keeping the little C at the catch, and it's very important having just that little hook. But that little hook is just that motion there. It's a little C. If you can imagine that ping pong ball, you're just hooking around. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah.
So, yes.
About the 8 junior coaching you did, how did you do strength training to your bow side and stroke side rowers? Did you think about, because they were young, stable?
Yes, we did a lot of work in pairs.
Okay.
And we moved them around in pairs, and then naturally some would be better on one side than the other.
Yeah,
and we had all of them in singles. So first, a lot of work in singles.
Yeah.
So we taught them their relative speeds in singles, and that made some of them train much harder because they wanted to be the fastest sculler.
Yeah.
And then it was interesting moving them into pairs. Some of them were much better on one side than the other.
Yeah.
And so that's how we chose what side to put them in, onto, was how they performed in pairs.
Yeah, that's good.
And any other question? If you have any questions or want to be in touch, that's great. And I'm the project in Bergerac. I'm hoping that at some point we'll get people to come out for training. It's a completely new venture for me after 16 years of coaching schoolboys in London and teaching. We're going to be using RP3s, video. We're going to be using the sensors from here. Yoga with lots of recovery cycling. In fact, I've just put in an order for 5 carbon bikes and 4 steel bikes, and I've already got 5 aluminium bikes. So we're going to have lots of bikes, lots of boats, and we're going to be working with the main theme of injury prevention and sustainable, effective training. And Charlotte will be helping coach for 6 weeks from sort of mid-July to the beginning of September.